Hello and welcome to episode 4. I'm Stuart McSkimming, and today we've got a great episode coming up focused on small charities. Later, I'll be chatting with Pratish, an implementation specialist who'll go into some detail on how smaller organizations can make AI products land better in their organization. But first, we've got Ivan Delany, who's strange enough the second Ivan to feature in my podcast. In his bio, it tells me that he's a technology and people leader with a history of transforming technical to human, which I love as an intro line. And also, it tells me that he's worked in every role in tech, from PM to solutions architect to coder to DBA and to infrastructure specialist. He's a man who knows a lot about tech. Ivan, welcome.
Thank you. Almost every role, Stuart. Not quite, yes, but a very broad range, which has been great fun, actually. Yeah.
So I'm pleased we managed to get Ivan on because I was looking for a technical expert who knew all about medium and large charities, but also had the experience of being a trustee of a smaller charity and was able, therefore, to compare the challenges that the different types of organizations would face. So, Ivan, can you tell us just a little bit about your role and the organizations that you work with?
Yes, of course. So the role pertinent to working in a small charity is I'm presently the lead digital trustee at an organisation called Cambridge House. By the way, Cambridge House, fantastic organisation, been around since 1889, and they were set up to provide social services to the people who are in like urban poor and also to campaign for social justice. And I would say that is pretty much what they do now, but they have specific services. If I may briefly touch on them before I go into me, in essence, four services. They do more than these four, but the four core services that they offer to people are a wonderful service called Safer Renting, led by the amazing Ros Spencer, who and Safer Renting, in essence, provides support and advice who are in rental crisis, and also that team, again under leadership of Ros, quite involved in the moment at the moment in lobbying and also advising on policy in the renters reform bill. You might have seen a few articles in some of the broadsheets, so that's great. They run a law centre to provide legal services as well to people with rental issues. Obviously, Centre Safer Renting and the law centre very much complementary, but not quite the same service. One is, more about support, advice, and so on, and one is actually, taking legal action. Basically, they also have a empowerment and inclusion service, which covers a number of sort of needs, particularly people, young people, also some people with disabilities, and they run fantastic events to, regular events, sessions, if you like, to enable people in their lives and bring them to a place of, where possible, self-sufficiency or over crisis and so on. And last but certainly not least, they run advocacy services. So if someone's very ill or incapable of representing themselves, say to their doctor or social services, etc., they come in and step in there. So they're really, really across the board for a small charity. It's quite a portfolio of services, which I'm sure we'll touch on shortly.
Yeah, and that's a strong combination of four services: safer renting, legal support, empowerment, inclusion, and advocacy. And having worked as a CIO at both Shelter and RBL, I've seen how offering that broad range of support combined with campaigning can be quite a symbiotic combination. But of course, at Cambridge House, also you're very lucky. The board are very lucky because you're working with outstanding CEO Karen Woodley, who I'm really hoping I'm going to get on a later episode to talk a little bit about AI and bias. But can you talk me a little bit through how exactly your role as a trustee works and what you bring to it as a digital expert?
Well, I suppose this starts with the CEO who, a year or so ago, decided, rightly so, that to make an impact, Cambridge House would look to, if you like, change somewhat what it does and as an organisation. So it provides fantastic services, but more and more they want to, if you like, influence through social research. And to do that, with the amazing data they collect, they need to think carefully about that data, how they collect it, how they analyze it, and of course now how they use tools like AI to make meaning of it, which they then can present out to the wider world, to policymakers and people in, frankly, positions of influence, to ensure that Cambridge House's mission, is very purpose, I should say, is very much pursued. Their purpose being to end social, economic, and cultural pressure in the UK. So this is, although the London centre, this is a big mission. So to do that, they needed someone on board that understood digital and how services could be digitized, but also how data can be used. And to be honest with you, the other things I bring to the board are hygiene factors. How are we going to be safe in terms of cybersecurity? How are we going to get value for money, if you like, in terms of the contracts we have to run our IT? Because whilst they're small, they've still got almost 60 people, so they do spend quite a bit of money on their IT and also their digital services. They wanted the best value there. So those are the two sort of spheres in which I'm operating, efficiency and value for money, and also the forward strategy and using data to very much drive forward social change.
Nicely summarized, Ivan. You bring both digital strategy and technology scrutiny or efficiency to the trustee board. I would say it was about 5 years ago that having a digital trustee really started to catch on. And it's been a really important move. As a CIO, I always found it really beneficial to have a critical friend on the board, which enabled a robust conversation to take place. But we're here to talk about AI at the moment, and this is a really nice lead in. So, thinking about what you bring in terms of that forward strategy, do you have any tips for other organizations in a similar position?
I think the first thing we've got to recognise is that this term AI is quite broad, and I would say it's starting to be shorthand for the generative AI models we saw come out in late 2022 and really hit the market in a big way more in 2023. So, those mainly texture-based models, you ask them a question or you pose something to them, come back to you with a wealth of information. Fantastic. However, there's more to AI than generative AI. We've got, if you like, the AI that you can use to look at data and provide insights that perhaps you can't have already seen without writing lots of bespoke code and so on.
So, Ivan, can I just actually do a very quick explainer on Gen AI at this point? So Gen AI is different to AI. AI has been around for a long time. In the last 18 months or so, there was a big leap forward all around Chat GPT. And really, for me, Gen AI has basically been around summarization. It's about data extraction. And more recently, it's been combined with some fancy technology around voice matching, image and video generation, and understanding of those image and video generation. But the big thing is around summarization, and it's summarization around content that comes into it, whether it's a content that's pulled from your sources. So, for example, there's great ones for summarizing meetings, or whether it's summarization of information that's on the internet more broadly. There's a really neat trick it does around summarizing that, and it does it through there's a whole variety of different coding tricks it does around neural networks and scoring and statistical analysis, which I'm not going to go into a detailed explanation on that because that's a whole degree thesis. And to give you an idea of how long this stuff has been around, because it isn't new, I did actually, as part of my university degree, do neural networks, which was well, more than 5 years ago. I'm not going to say how many years ago it was. Ivan,
Just go then.
Ivan's laughing away here because he can see from my face that it's definitely more than five, perhaps more than 25 years ago. But it's Gen AI has been a big step, and I think that the big step forward has been really around scale. There's been a lot of scale and data center capacity processing power thrown at Gen AI, which has enabled it to do things which we could never think would be possible. Um, and the only other thing I would add in is when people are trying to think about how do we get their heads around this big change, I'll cast a mind back 25 years ago to when Google came along. and search engines appeared, then it seemed like it was magic that it could search the entire internet just like that in a click of a finger, and no one could quite understand how it worked. But it was a combination of processing power, but really good indexing of the internet. It didn't search the whole internet as you typed it. Of course, Google has a huge index, and then some clever tricks around relevancy and context, which pulls it all together nicely.
Mm.
And it very much, this again, bringing in Gen AI isn't about magic. It is, there are some fairly simple techniques which have been around for a while behind it, which, when combined with working at scale, give something which looks pretty amazing. I'm going to stop on that explainer now because you're in the middle of telling us some of your top tips around trustees for AI. So hopefully people are still there.
More than just trustees, I'd say leaders of any small charities or indeed any small organizations. The things I would suggest is, first of all, have your staff understand not just AI, but understand technology. If you can provide good training and education and open sessions, do that, because all the best ideas will come from the people that understand your organization, understand what you're doing anyway. I can't, overemphasize how much benefit education brings within organizations when you're talking about digital and AI and so on. I don't mean specific education, just awareness. These are the things that are available in the market, etc. And the simple things like understanding, for example, how to use the summarization facilities in Teams. A lot of people aren't aware of these tools, and when they see them, they go, "Oh, wait a minute, I could perhaps use that here," etc., or something like it. So that's my first sort of giveaway, is invest in your people. The other, another, I think, essential sort of component is to have a policy. Now, Stuart, I've heard a few of your other attendees who've talked about having an AI strategy and so on. Great, that's all great. I think for really small organizations, it's really difficult to do that. That are just struggling having, if you like, a data policy, understanding their retention periods and so on. An AI strategy is way beyond, if you like, what they're looking at right now. But it's really important for people to understand, feel comfortable with what can they do with particularly the publicly available generative AI tools, and perhaps what they shouldn't be doing. A great example, which I did hear of, which is why I'm going to use it, was someone taking the salaries of their organization, putting it to ChatGPT because they wanted to analyze it and understand if they're at the benchmark rate. Don't do that. As soon as you're doing that, you're putting that data out there. Imagine that you're effectively just posting it onto a public website, which is a really good way of thinking about it, actually. Putting this stuff into the ChatGPT, etc. Would you be willing to just post it online? If the answer is no, perhaps don't do it. Really think about it for sure. But we all know it's easy to say what not to do, but hard to take on what not to. But also make it clear what you can do. Taking that email that perhaps is just a little message to someone, getting it nuanced better, or perhaps taking some user feedback, as I did recently. I had reams and reams of feedback, put it into the ChatGPT. I wanted a summary of the top 5 points. Worked really well. And then moving on from that one, I think one thing that sounds perhaps obvious, but perhaps isn't always paid attention to, is understand what you do as an organization. What is it that you do to provide the services that you offer? And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, I think, well, we all know what we do in our organization. We provide this service. But I'd ask yourself, ask again, what do you do, and then how are you doing it? And when you look at those processes, often which aren't written down, often that might just have wonderful people running along each day, doing their activities to provide the service. When you start looking at those, you might say, wait a minute, you're doing this activity 10 times a day, and it's just a variant depending on whether, depending on if the client is in this situation, that situation. Can we use perhaps some AI to speed that process up to help you in your role, maybe to somewhat automate it? There's lots of given there, but I'm going to give two other, points to round up.
Can I just interrupt again before you do your 2 points? Because I would say,
Cool.
what do you do? How do you do it? What's your process? I
Mm,
really like that because without dumbing down the role of a CIO or an IT director, that is the thing that sits in the back of my head in
all of it.
so many conversations and uh, in trying to, in the same way as it's really fascinating if I speak to a fundraising director or a welfare director or a director of membership or director of HR, where, and trying to understand what their role is like as a CIO and an IT director, you just hit on exactly the big thing that's the heart of so much of what you're trying to do. It's what are we trying to do here? How do we do it currently? What is our process? And that will be going through most IT director and CIOs' minds, I think, when they're looking at any new sets of problems.
It will. And I think the reason it's worth re-saying is one, as you say, we know that that's what a lot of us are thinking about. But, imagine people listening to this podcast won't all be, I certainly hope they're not all, you know, CIOs. And so there's some understanding why your CIO, why your director of digital and transformation, etc., is coming to you and asking these questions. I mean, how are you doing this? And oh gosh, why are they asking? It's like we just do it. So that there's some awareness of why they're asking, not just they're not just testing, how well do you know your organization? They're genuinely trying to scratch away and work out how they can make your life easier, how they can, pull you out of the day-to-day operational weeds and get you working on real value where you can use your intellectual prowess. But particularly with small charities, what starts being hard is getting access, frankly, to those skills that can ask those questions and then, assess them and suggest roadmaps and ways forward. And I think for smaller organisations, you've got to be creative. Look to partner with potentially other charities. Look to bring in people like me, who you could bring in as maybe a trustee. Is a good way of getting access to, to good skills and insight potentially without having to bring in a full-time, let's be honest, fairly expensive role. Um, but also, if there are starting to be partners out there, as in commercial providers that are looking to enter the market. Can you partner with one that can work with you over a long time to develop, your strategy and ask you the questions that need to be asked, so you can self-reflect on how AI and indeed technology in general can move your organization forward. I think expecting small sort of, 10 to 70 person organizations to do that internally all by themselves is a huge ask. And I worry, a bit like you, Stuart, I worry that some of these organizations will just wait for the tools to be available in the products they use, which is one way of going, and maybe that's okay. But there are going to be so much opportunities to make more of an impact in the interim, which are not taken. And I think that's a concern I have. And it leads me neatly onto the last point, which is try it. I know in your podcast and also generally in the industry, there's been lots of rightly concern about risk, and even I've spoken about the risk of using the public available tools. But if you can create something fairly quickly with that partner, which is possible, it's quite possible to create an AI chatbot in a day. I know, I've worked with people that have done it, and then test it with a safe number of people where you can get the feedback. And also, this is for me one of the most important aspects, where your staff, your clients, your supporters start being comfortable with it and don't see it as this black box that perhaps is, quite nefarious. They start realizing this is just another tool. And I think the Google analogy you used earlier is a really good one. It's not magic. It's another tool that can move you forward.
That was brilliant, Ivan. I'm just going to summarize because we talked around that quite a bit and I interrupted a few times. So you got 5 points. One was invest in your people, provide education and training because the best ideas will come from them. Number two, have a policy, hard when you're a small organization, but really important. Number three, understand your organization. What are you doing? How are you doing it? What are your processes? Number four, partner, find ways to access the expertise you need, whether that's through a digital trustee like yourself, Ivan, or whether it's through commercial partners. And five, don't be scared to prototype. Don't get lost in the theory. Remember, fail fast, fail often is the route to success. Try stuff, prototype it. I think that's a really good set of 5 principles, even if you're a larger organization. One of the things I think that I really like there was you talked a bit about people. Your first one, invest in your people. I always think if you've got teams that aren't working very well to start off with, if you've got, for example, a finance team and an IT team that aren't speaking a common language, we know from IT projects we go into that one of the biggest challenges is getting that mutual understanding there. As soon as you throw AI into the mix, it just adds another layer of complication. So you really need to make sure you've got that right and you've got that common language there. Okay, so I'm going to put those 5 tips in the newsletter as well for anyone listening to this. Head over to LinkedIn and subscribe to save writing them down. But given that you mentioned prototyping and trying things as your 5th tip there, I want to dig a bit deeper on that one because last week we heard from Rob at the British Heart Foundation about their large charity approach to prototyping. Can you tell us a little bit about the things that you think might work in a smaller organization?
I think what's slightly different in the small charity world as well is having that awareness of perhaps what's going to take quite a bit of resource or even a medium amount of resource, and what is straightforward to implement. An example I was thinking of to present your HR policies. People ask very simple questions about how do I calculate my holiday each year, etc. That's quite a safe use case. But when we talk about I think there's always this, if you like, propensity to be carried away and go, oh, we could digitize our frontline services, put in voice engines and have AI speaking to our clients. Let's say, well, one, obviously, are we all going to be comfortable with that? Probably not. And secondly, the thing about AI is it is fallible. It does have its moments. And I think there always needs to be, and this is a very important point we haven't touched on yet, a human aspect to check that output that's been given, particularly to clients who could be in a really sensitive situation, is actually valid. You can imagine giving bad advice to somebody who's just perhaps who's very worried about being evicted. That could have a catastrophic effect on the life. And you want to make sure that ultimately a human is there. You have to look at risk, not just from the perspective of corporate risk, if you like, and data, but also service risk. Is this really safe to use with your clients?
I'm going to pause in a minute, but I think the chatbots example, it keeps coming round and round and round. The way
Mm,
that service delivery charities operate, the chatbots, chat is at the heart of Chat GPT, obviously. But the chatbots is at the heart of Gen AI, and I think the whole contact center way of working is going to go through a revolution in the next 2 or 3
yeah,
years. I think that's one of the big things that
definitely.
Gen AI is going to do. Is it's going to revolutionize the way that contact centers work, and I think that will impact a lot on service delivery charities about how they talk to their beneficiaries, and about making sure that that works well and they have the right safeguards in place. It's really important. So that's been fascinating, Ivan, to hear your 5 AI adoption tips for small charities. Thank you so much for that. And also, thank you for telling us a bit about Cambridge House, which was absolutely fascinating. Thanks again for joining us. Been great to chat to you, and good luck with your work as a trustee.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thanks for having me along.
And stay tuned because coming up next, we've got an interview with an implementation specialist just after a short break. Today, I'm sitting with Pratish Kotecha, PK. I've been keen to get him on for a while, and now we're talking about smaller charities in this episode. I think he has some really interesting insights for us. He's worked for 17 years in delivering business change for charity sector, legal sector, energy sector clients. Pratish, can you tell us a little bit about the areas you specialize in?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Stuart. Yeah, so I suppose I specialize mainly in user adoption and particularly with Microsoft products. So starting off with the legal sector, with Microsoft Word and Excel and Microsoft Office, and moving now on to Copilot and things like that. And I suppose that my passion also linked in from when I used to have my little Microsoft Windows phones. I wish they were still around.
And there was me thinking we were going to be talking about AI and new technologies, but straight away we're back to Windows Nokia phones. So I'm going to drag us, but I'm not going down that route. But I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about how you introduce in change to organizations, particularly the things that you think are important for us to focus on with small charities in mind if they're introducing new AI technology.
Sure, and it comes back to what I do, and it's user adoption. It's easy just to be able to flick the switch and give it to everyone, but will they be actually using it correctly? And the common thing you'll always find in any technology with user adoption is, it's not working. The user can't actually make it work because they don't know how to, they don't know what to do with it. And I think particularly with AI, the key is going to be around how to prompt for the right answers. It's that typical, data in, data out. So if you put bad data in and you're asking the wrong questions, you're not going to get the right answers, and then people will lose trust in it. There's definitely a scope in there for the whole sort of prompt learning. So, learning how to prompt AI to get the right answers, but also where to pick up the source data from. The key, I think, is going to be down to training people on how to ask the right questions to get the right answers, rather than just being able to just give it to them and letting them sort of fiddle through it, because they'll soon get very frustrated, like they do in all tech. When you just roll something out without much guidance and training, it can work. People will use it, but they'll just be at the tip of the iceberg. They won't be able to really use it as well as they should be able to.
Yeah, and I think that's the age-old rule. It's really whether it's AI or it's a CRM system, it's about your new finance system. It's about helping your team use the system. It's less about making sure you've got really the latest cutting edge technology. The real differentiator in making it work in your organization is making sure it fits your organization, and about making sure your team members really understand how to get the most from the software. I guess one other thing. So I'm interested about use cases in smaller charities, because we are here to talk about smaller charities, Pratish. So have you seen any really good use cases, particularly those you think which might work for a smaller organization?
Sure. I think the key one that everyone's really loving about it is the summarizing. Is this being able to just send it off into the internet or into all your documents or into all your Viva Engage posts, and just being able to come back and give you a summary, or particularly in Teams, for example, you can get a summary of your meetings. They can write up your action points for you. So just a saving time in that side of things, of creating that summarized content. But recently, we've been looking at using it in our Viva Engage communities, or good old Yammer, where you can really use it for support teams to be able to get answers very quickly, to reply to people who've asked questions, because the AI, or Copilot in this case, will go off and have read through the whole history of that community and be able to very quickly and instantly give you proposed answers that you can just plug in or cut and paste and reformat if you needed to, and then answer back. So I think time saving is probably one of the key ones that we've seen in the corporate world that people are really sort of looking into.
And that's a great example around summarizing, which I think lots of small organizations will find as a real time saver. There's a whole trust issue, though. Of course, do you trust the summaries that you're getting from this technology? It is new technology. In a previous episode, we heard from John Fox at Alzheimer's Society talking about the transcription software with their advisors on their helpline. And I think for smaller organizations, there's a lot of benefits there. Do you think that this is going to be an issue?
Yeah, but that's where I think the trust comes in as well, because if you are on a call and someone is, causing a bit of conflict and pressure to you, you could have that AI help you by coach you into asking the right questions to calm the person down, or give them advice on some of the regulatory or procedural things that might be happening. Again, like you said, the key there, and I think this is one of the challenges that we'll face, is how much can we trust that AI and the content that it provides us? And I think that's um, one of the issues I see coming up is that whole compliance versus completion. Do we want to just roll it out to everyone, or do we actually want to make sure we are compliant? We're accountable with the content that we've got. And
But just a sec, can I interrupt? I think I disagree with something there, because we're in a place where that dynamic can't really play out, because there isn't a choice in charities between compliance and completion. The beneficiary risks and the reputational risks are just too great to actually not go down that compliance route. But it does lead into some other interesting areas, though. You're talking a bit about sentiment analysis there, which takes us back to John Fox's example from episode 2 at the Alzheimer's Society. And there's something really interesting going on there, because there's a big piece for service delivery charities coming up on how their digital customer interactions work. It's the same way that we went through that major shift with charities when they went from face-to-face interactions to blended digital approaches maybe 10 years ago. And we're now seeing that blended AI approach coming in the same way that's happened in the private sector. And it's going to be a challenge for charities, because on the other side, you've got these Gen AI technologies, things like Google Astra and GPT-4o, which we saw going crazy last week when they launched. And this is software that's got billions invested in it. And it's going to be holding the feet to the fire for the charity digital teams, because they've got to find a way that the public can understand the value that their charity's offering when you've got a free, instantly available competitor on the smartphone, which has the intelligence and it has the access to the entire internet, and will be quite happily give you advice on everything from housing issues to mental health issues to medical issues. In fact, anything under the sun that your helpline might be offering. And on the face of it, and even in some cases in reality, it's going to be able to give as good or even better advice than the organization can. And of course, on the compliance versus completion side of things, it's not even an issue for Gen AI, because compliance is struggling to keep up with AI. And so there's a whole competitor there that's not got that as something that's pulling them back. And I guess that leads me nicely onto my next question, which is all about what happens next. And this is an impossible question given all the things that have happened in the last 18 months. But can you tell us a little bit about what do you think is going to happen 2024, 2025?
Yeah. So my personal view, and everything on this call has been personal in case other people go and look out for where I am and who I work for. But my personal view is, I think it's going to be similar to what happened at the pandemic. Like things like Teams and Zoom, where suddenly everyone needed to be on it, and I suppose it wasn't they wanted to be on it, but they had to be on it, and they needed to. And I think I see AI in a similar vein, where people are trying to get onto it, trying to figure out how it can help and how it can benefit them, because they can see the potential of it. But I think what will happen is at some point, like we mentioned earlier around user adoption and those processes, where there will be a point when either something will go really badly wrong for one or two companies and then everyone will get scared, or people will just start using it and go, oh, is that it? And then not really get the full potential of it. So I think in 24, big, massive uptake. It'll probably peter down, or unfortunately, there might be a couple of negative stories that will sort of slow it down. But the excitement, I think, in 2025 will be there's probably things that we haven't even thought that it could do will start coming on.
So let's go with that. The excitement of the things we haven't yet thought about. That's been really great, Pratish. I absolutely love that conversation with a real positive ending there. Thank you so much for agreeing to be my guest on this today. And I hope everyone listening out there has enjoyed listening to it. Thank you very much. And goodbye, Pratish. Great to chat to you.
No problem. Thanks, Stuart.
I really hope you enjoyed those two interviews there. We heard in our small charity special today from Ivan Delany from Cambridge House, and we heard his 5 AI adoption tips for small charities. And we also took a deep dive into actually delivering change from a change specialist, Pratish Kotecha. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Unfortunately, like MPs and school kids, we're going to be taking a break next week. It's half term, and it's always important to model good behaviours like taking a break from work, especially when the sun's hopefully shining, so you can come back with some new ideas. If you're looking for something good to read on your holidays, if you are going on holiday, a good fictional AI holiday read, I'm reading Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro at the moment. I think the theme is something around faith, love, and loyalty and what they might look like to an AI. But I'm not really a book reviewer, so I might have got that completely wrong. I'm going to be back on 7th of June, where perhaps I'll be musing around why OpenAI skipped over me and instead chose a voice eerily similar to Scarlett Johansson for their chatbot. I really do hope you have a great break, and I'll hear from you soon. Bye.